Yo, yo, yo. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Test, test, testes, 1, 2, 3. Yes, I need hecklers. Pardon me? No, this is very, very free-form heckling. All right. It is now 5 o'clock. Do you know where your Al is? All right. I'm going to get this started because I have some material here, and I know y'all want to get some dinner, and I want to get ready. Oh, shut up. I know. I come to the South, and all of a sudden I pretend I'm Southern. I'm actually from Cleveland, Ohio. I have been for all my life. But I have this weird habit of picking up accents and things no matter where I'm at. I'm a heck of a lot of fun in interesting groups of people. The presentation I'm going to, holy crap. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you, Keynote. But that's not the slide I wanted. Ah, there it is. The presentation I'm going to be giving today is entitled Creativity and Hacker Culture, subtitled The Role of Local and Hyperlocal Interaction. This is a presentation that I've been thinking about for basically as long as I've been attending HackerCons. Hyper, yes. There will be some buzzword bingo in here, but that's just because I have to admit, I'm actually a manager in my day life. Yes, I did not use the word synergy, I promise. But I'm actually an IT and facilities manager at a university in Cleveland, Ohio. And a number of years back, I started this thing called Nauticon because I was attending a lot of HackerCons like Phreaknic, DEF CON, Hope, SummerCon, a whole bunch of them. And pardon me? Rubicon. Woo! Rubicon. And I realized that there was a lot more going on at the event than what was being advertised. And a lot of the events themselves were, while they were being classified as HackerCons, there was a whole lot of other stuff going on that wasn't necessarily traditionally hacker-related, but was still very interesting. And in some cases, even more interesting than the content that was on the schedule that people were attending. So let's talk about some foundations here. For my presentation, when I refer to a HackerCon, I'm referring to it in its modern parlance, which means that we're not simply talking about computer security conventions, because I think a lot of those have grown up. Sex parties and ponies, yes. There are still a lot of traditional type of quote-unquote HackerCons. You have your DEF CON, you have your very stereotypical Hope, you have all your very expensive events like Black Hat and CanSac West and all that other kind of great stuff that I'm in no way able to afford. But when I talk about cons, I'm talking about all these other different kind of events, because I wouldn't really consider Phreaknic a pure HackerCon, and I think some of you may agree with me because of the aspects of like you have the anime room, you have all the social interaction, all the really great room parties, and pardon me? Yeah. So yeah. Now. Not necessarily. I'm going to disprove you. And also, when I talk about these different types of conferences and these different types of localities, I'm going to refer to the megacons. Now, when I talk about a megacon, I'm thinking 5,000 plus people, Hope, DEF CON, something that everybody knows about, the media knows about it, it's been done in the news, overdone, and is, for lack of a better word, somewhat played out. When I'm talking about regional events, Phreaknic is a good example of a regional event because you pull people from, Georgia. I came from Cleveland, Baltimore, D.C. area, and then you get to the local and hyperlocal. And when you get to this point, when you talk about local events, you're talking about maybe something specific to somebody, say, in Northeast Ohio, in my example, or in the Cleveland area, or in the New York area. And when I refer to hyperlocal, I'm referring to perhaps a neighborhood inside of a city. Now, once we get to that level of granularity, some people go, well, how does that relate to a HackerCon at all? And my proposal is that there are HackerCons going around all over the place, or there could be people just don't know that they exist yet or that it's possible. And from my personal perspective, as I said, basically I've been attending a lot of cons since about 2000. I got into it because I finally had money to go to attend these things. And I had a really good time, but I had a really good time, not necessarily in all the programming and functions. I had a really good time talking to people out when I used to smoke, out in the front of the building, or at a room party, or, after a presentation where I decided to, get up or say, that was bullshit. I can't believe I just spent 45 minutes of my life listening to that. And then somebody else next to me going, yeah, that was bullshit. And then we talk about for the next 3 hours why it was bullshit. And, actually had some real value and some real knowledge and discussion that came out from that. And the other aspect that I'm going to touch upon is creativity. From my perspective, creativity is the one thing that really separates HackerCons from all the other events out there. I mean, you have sci-fi cons, you have anime cons, you have, stamp collector cons, you have people that, like to collect Zippos. The one thing that differentiates us from everybody else is that there's an added element of personal expression and creativity that I don't think a lot of the other events have. All right, so these are some of the questions that I'm going to hope to attempt to address. Is creativity impacted by event size? Do larger events mean that you're going to have more creativity or vice versa? If so, how does that impact everything? And what is the unique value that smaller events offer to people that attend them versus the larger events? Because there's a certain amount of there's a lot of resources that can be placed in larger events that smaller events can't have, and does that really make any difference or not? And also, how can we apply all the lessons that we're learning and talking about today to smaller events in our own area? Because I'm a firm believer that in order to really, make what we do here this weekend matter, you have to take it home with you and do something with it. It's a very challenging problem. And it's not necessarily one that's been solved, but it's one that needs to be addressed because that's, it really makes the time that you spend here useful in some way. And actually, you can learn and continue to grow from that. All right. So here's some of the benefits that I was just thinking about when I thought, okay, if I go to something like DEF CON, what about DEF CON is really great? What about DEF CON is fantastic? They have a lot of money. They have a lot of people resources. They can spend, $5,000, $10,000 on something and think nothing of it. They have a full company structure set up where people pull yearly salaries in order to make sure the event runs. So by that metric, DEF CON has the ability to provide for its attendees a lot of things that Phreaknic can't. Nice four-color glossy programs, nice expensive hotels, huge convention spaces, the ability to fly in presenters from other countries, all these types of things. They also can take advantage of economies of scale. When you deal with small events, you deal with a very expensive per-person rate, no matter how much you try to economize. Phreaknic, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best values in all of the, in terms of HackerCons. What you get here for your money is an incredibly good value. Speaking of somebody who runs an event, not a con, for example, for us, takes between $65 and $70 per person to run. And if you don't pay that in your ticket, I pay that out of my American Express, my Discover, my MasterCard, and whatever else hasn't been declined yet. Larger cons can take advantage of all these big things. They can order, say, 1,000 cases of a beverage and give it away and pay only 12 cents for it, 12 cents a can or whatever. Also, the mega cons tend to have a really specific focus. If you're going to DEF CON, you know exactly what it is you're going to get for the most part. You're going to get presentations, probably some of which have been, regurgitated and redone from Black Hat or somebody else. They're going to be specific about computer security or network security or some other aspect like that. It sells itself because they have a very good niche chosen. So it's really easy for them to brand themselves and to sell themselves to somebody who potentially wants to come to the event. And finally, they have a really large user base. I mean, anybody who's been to a really large HackerCon knows that there's just such a wide range of people and such a great amount of people that, that is also a resource that the event can pull from simply to get the leverage it needs to accomplish, economies of scale and all this other kind of thing. And finally, going along with all of that, there's so much mindshare and visibility for these events, it's hard to talk about them and not have somebody, specifically those who aren't in the community, know exactly what the event is about. I mean, I wasn't at DEF CON this year, which is a first for me in about 7 or 8 years, but, immediately I knew about I forget what's-her-face, who tried to come in and infiltrate the con, and, yeah, the reporter, I mean, it's silly. From my perspective, that she even tried that tactic, but I find it even funnier the fact that the event itself was such a target because she assumed she was going to find something at that event. The chances are she wasn't going to find, because that really wasn't the purpose of the event. I'm convinced that like a lot of the halo of pseudonymity and things that surround events like DEF CON is really kind of bullshit. Because there's 8,000 people there. You're going to be seen by more people than you could possibly count. So there's really no expectation there of releasing any really deep secrets or anything that really shouldn't be out in the open. DEF CON is essentially it's a really fun party. It's one of the better parties out there, but it's not the kind of place where you're going to find the kind of information that is really underground and is really hard to get a hold of. So, now that we talked about some of the benefits of the bigger events, I'm going to try to see if we can pinpoint some of the benefits of smaller events. The one thing that really motivates me, especially for Nauticon, is the dedicated fan base. I mean, if I said Nauticon right now, how many people here would admit that they've been to one? A lot of people. And if anybody who's on our IRC channel knows, what is kind of the Nauticon battle cry? Nauticon! Nauticon! So you'll see that a lot. I mean, it's kind of funny where I'll go to events like Phreaknic or Ohio Linux Fest, and I'll see somebody and I'm like, oh my God, Nauticon! That was an awesome event. I had a really good time. Or I'll see somebody at Hope that I saw at Phreaknic, and I'm like, oh God, I haven't seen you, since Phreaknic last year. How you doing? And there's people who are very dedicated to these events. I mean, this is the third year I've been to this particular one in a row, and I see a lot of the same people that perhaps I don't see at other cons, but they're here. And it's kind of nice to see them here because I know that they're supporting this event, they find something valuable in this event, and they're having a good time. So, that's something that a lot of local events have that perhaps the bigger events don't. I didn't show up to DEF CON this year, and after it was over, I was like, I didn't really miss it. I had a good time at home. I would rather spend that same time and actually hang out with people in my local area and do something cool rather than flying all the way to Vegas and losing everything in my savings at the gambling tables instead of actually talking to people. Also, I'll argue that when you're at a smaller event, the graph of connections between people is a lot smaller. When you're at an event like DEF CON, if you're trying to find somebody that's into the same thing you are, it might be kind of a challenge to find that. But when you're at an event like Phreaknic or Nauticon or some other smaller event, you are more likely to be able to talking to somebody, say outside, having a cigarette, or just at a room party, and say, well, I'm into XYZ, and you're next to somebody who says, oh yeah, well I have a buddy who knows somebody who's also into that, or somebody will overhear that you're talking about that. And it's really easy to get to know almost everybody at the event. Once you get past about 300, 400, 500 people, that becomes increasingly more difficult, such that there's a lot more cliques that develop. And if you've ever been to a DEF CON or Hope, I'm not saying they're bad events, but there's cliques. There's definite groups of people within the bigger group that kind of make it a challenge to get inside of and make it a challenge to interact with. So instead of having this massive pool of people that you can bounce ideas off of, like at this event, it's a little more difficult to find those interactions, perhaps. And finally, I would like to argue that at smaller events, it's really easy to change something about the event if you hate it. I mean, one of the hallmarks about Nauticon that I find really pleasing is I'll get up at the end of the event, like they do here and at ShmooCon, and we'll say, okay, what was it that you liked? and people will tell us what they liked, or more importantly, what was it about our event or this event that really sucked so that we can change it for next year. When you get to an event as large as Hope or DEF CON or some of these other events, it's really hard to have your voice heard because your voice is just a small part of a very large picture. And so it's hard to really, make your opinion heard. Whereas I'm very keen on listening to everybody's opinions about the event that I throw with the help of many people, some of which are here, so that I can make the event valuable for you. And finally, kind of along the same theme as the first two, I find when I'm at an event like this, I'm more as part of a tribe of people. We all have similar interests. We might not have similar backgrounds or similar education levels, but I feel very comfortable going up to each and every one of you saying, hey, what is it you're into? Did you like my talk? Whereas when you're at such a large mass of people as DEF CON, it's easy to get lost in the crowd and to just become part of the mass versus a member of the community. Herding cats. One of the difficulties, though, in events like these, and I had a really good conversation with somebody yesterday about this, you have a really good time at Phreaknic. You have, you meet a lot of great people. You drink a lot of really bad beer. You get really drunk. You have a lot of great conversations. Then you go home on Sunday night or Monday, and a lot of that energy and a lot of that information kind of starts to dissipate almost immediately. And it's a real challenge to try to keep the spirit of what you're doing alive after the event's done, because you have real work to go back to. You might have kids, a wife who isn't into computer hacking. Thank God I have one that is. But it can be a real challenge to keep that energy. And also one of the things that we identified is that when we leave this space, there's no longer a common medium of communication. When you're at an event like this, you have a lot of interpersonal communication. We can talk to each other right here. This is essentially one big, large party channel. Unfortunately, I'm the one speaking right now, so a lot of you can't respond back because you don't have microphones. But when the talk's over, we can all discuss things. But when we go online again, we have IRC, we have email, IM, wikis, web pages, RSS feeds, mailing lists, news groups, forums, you name it, and all of the information and all of the energy kind of gets dissipated into all these other mediums. So whatever energy remains gets, diluted even more, making it more difficult to keep a lot of the things that we're talking about and a lot of the experiences fresh. I can think of many examples of where I've talked to somebody at an event and I've said, oh, wow, I really, I would like to collaborate with you or talk to you on this subject. And then I realize at the next year's event that, oh, wow, hey, I met you last year. We were going to talk and work on this one project. And what was your name? So it becomes a real challenge to try to, keep everything going. And I think it's really important that it does. But it does become difficult. And also, due to the community that we are, I think we have to admit that some of us have at least some issues with socialization and perhaps don't have all of the same relevant social skills that people not in our community have. It's hard if you're not used to talking to people to go up to somebody and say, hey, what are you into? Al is like the complete antithesis of this, although, Al might be overcompensating. I don't know. But it takes. I mean, for example, some of you might have a real hard time getting up in front of a room of people like this and talking. I have no problem with that, but I recognize that not everybody, has the comfort level to start a conversation or to meet somebody new, and that's kind of one of the difficulties in continuing things on. The way to achieve the way to start organizing things post-con, especially post-small con, involves leadership. And this applies not only to small cons, but perhaps user groups, projects, programs, whatever it is that you're into. Without leadership, I'm convinced that it becomes really difficult to attain anything of value. And there's a whole wide spectrum of leadership styles that can be put along this continuum, anywhere from anarchy, which I've gotten involved in some open source projects, and the whole organizational structure is basically, well, let's all decide what it is we want to do, and we'll figure out by maybe committee what it is, what features we want in the software, or we want to organize events, so let's all vote on this event and figure out how we're going to run it. An example of this that I know of is Ohio Linux Fest. Who here has ever heard of or been to Ohio Linux Fest? All right, a few of you. It's a great event. It's a lot of fun, but they organize basically by pure democracy, which sounds really great. Everybody gets their voice heard, but the problem is nothing happens because nobody is actually forced to be responsible for something. There's no hierarchy. So it's basically whoever wants to pick this up will do it, and boy, I hope we get everything done, because if not, we're really screwed. However, you get to the other side of things. There was a demo party in Utah, whose name I won't mention, and anybody who's not familiar with demo parties, basically 3D graphics and audio demonstrations to demonstrate how wonderful computers are and how they make such pretty pictures. This event was run by somebody who had consolidated so much power to himself that it was impossible for anybody else to get anything done, because they had to all go through this one person to beg to see if they were allowed to, book a hotel or print out flyers or do whatever you need to do. So on one end you have the, everything's happy, let's all try to figure it out together, to the, I am God, I tell you exactly what it is you need to do, and if I screw up, well, then the whole event's going to go down because it's my event, and y'all can go to hell. As with most things in life, there has to be a happy medium. And what we try to do with Nauticon, and what I see a lot of other events doing, especially Phreaknic and Skydog's help and Scott's help, has been to kind of have a very strong leadership core and then have an organized base. Because when you deal with creative endeavors, people are very willing to help out and donate their time. But a lot of times they don't want to be solely responsible for go or no-go of some aspect of the event or software or creative project or something like that. So what you need to do essentially is, you really need to demonstrate that you have somebody or a group of people at the top who kind of have a big picture of what the heck's going on, and then you can kind of divvy up the work in smaller portions to people who want to help so that things actually get accomplished in the end. Yes. So, creative impact. When dealing with events like these and also expounding it to other projects, there's a lot. Hold on, let me look. Okay. I hate those slides, so I'm going to ignore them. The point I'm trying to make here, and I realize this is kind of a rambling mess of a talk, the point I'm trying to make is that this HackerCon model that a lot of us are familiar with and have been to many times is a pretty good model to start with. There are some things we could do to improve it. More ponies, that's a good one. And it's also a good model that we can apply to other projects that we work on. However, as identified, there's some of the problems, and some of those problems involve, how to keep things going once we're done. That's a problem I haven't figured out yet. So what I'd like to try to discuss now is ways in which perhaps you've been involved with projects or have managed projects such that you're able to keep, what it is you're going alive once you're done. For example, with Nauticon, one of the problems we're having right now is that we do have, a wiki, a mailing list, a forums, and all these other different ways, and it's hard for everybody to know where to get information about the event that's both authoritative, but in a manner that they, that's reasonable for people to acquire it with. Anybody run any projects? Yes, Bruce?
included, be this group hug, and this very open community, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's been done. And I think with respect to the follow-on, the follow-through at the end of any
Yeah.
project, the maniac's got to do it for some time. I think that once you set the ground rules that this is the way it's going to go down, that's what people are going to do. And so as people kind of, emerge and help it behind that person, eventually they'll just pick up the same thing. I was involved in a community wireless thing that I was organizing in Northern Virginia, and after a couple years of running this thing in an ad hoc thing, I had two desires. One, to make it more formal so we get more stuff done, but two, I didn't want to be at the helm anymore. And it turns out you can't have two large pieces of change occur.
No.
We made it really organized, and then I stepped back and just literally, ended overnight. Everyone was like, oh.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest challenges that I've seen a lot of events face, is that you'll have one person that's really gung-ho into this, and all of a sudden, something in life changes, and all of a sudden the whole thing falls apart. Or they burn themselves out and say, screw this, it isn't worth it. It was fun at the beginning, but now I just don't have the time or the energy to do this. So it's one of the things that you have to kind of be careful of. But by the same token, as you said, Bruce, you really need one person or a couple people to step forward and say, I want this to happen. Because that's a lot of time, that's all the motivation it takes to get something off the ground. When it comes to Nauticon, it was essentially a friend of mine who has since passed away. We were drinking beers on my porch one night, and I said, man, Rubicon went by the wayside. It's no longer here. I'm really depressed. And he goes, well, you know enough about cons. Why don't you throw your own? And I sat there for about a half hour, and I said, well, we need a good name. And, of course, we came up with Nauticon. And then after that, I'm like, well, now we better actually decide how we're going to do it. But it was a lot of fun then to figure out, okay, well, we're going to do this endeavor. How are we going to make it happen? And one of the things that we're starting to do in our organization, at least, is diversify a lot of that. I don't want to be responsible for everything. I don't want to be responsible for all the details. I want to be responsible for all the things at the top. And, that's what I enjoy doing. One of the things that I also realize is critical to the success of not only hacker cons, but other projects and creative endeavors is letting people do what it is they're good at. And this is a basic management principle, actually, that a lot of managers don't seem to know about, which is kind of scary. But it really behooves everybody to let people do what they do best. For example, where I work at my job, I don't, even though I have a lot of technical knowledge, I don't tell my sysadmins how to run their systems, right? As long as they do a reasonably good job of doing their job and make reasonably good decisions, I'm not going to get in their way and say, well, I prefer this mailing software. I think you need to use this. In the end, it doesn't really matter to me. It matters that the job gets done. And what I think a lot of people in organizations, and especially creative projects, get kind of diluted by is all the bureaucracy involved. There's some people who are just rules lawyers, for lack of a better term. They're the guys in D&D that will be the DM and will make up tons of rules just to piss everybody off and annoy the hell out of you. But I think it's more important to try to keep the amount of bureaucracy and system to such a minimum that you actually get creative work done. Because whether or not a lot of people admit it, in the hacker community, there is a lot of creativity and there's a lot of creative energy. And it's not necessarily with technology and computer security and network security. There's an incredible amount of creativity involved with, with artistic aspects of implementing technology. One of the things that we pride ourselves at Nauticon, at least, is trying to focus on the things that perhaps you've never heard of. One of our events, for example, that I absolutely love is called Anything But Ethernet. And essentially, at this event, what we challenge people to do is to create a network connection made of everything but Ethernet. Great. And we've had such wild things as T1s over barbed wire. That was a fun one. We have somebody that sets up a model train set and transmits bits through little marbles in this model train. And a lot of people look at that and go, well, what's the practical value of that? How does this really apply to hacking? And for a lot of us, as we heard in Rick Dakin's discussion, there's an incredible amount of value there. That's really what hacking's all about. Who really cares about vendor products and software systems? That's all well and good. That pays the bills. But when it comes to the end of the day, what are you going to do with all this stuff to have fun? And that's what I think a lot of the smaller HackerCons have got right. How do you have fun with technology? How do you play with it? How do you do things with it that it's not supposed to do? And beyond that, expand it to to art and music, because there's a lot of parallels there that people don't see. One of the things that Nauticon has now done is partied with Block Party, which is currently one of North America's largest demo parties, and it's only in its second year. And there's a lot of creativity and artistic work going on there. There's a lot of great music. People have an incredible capacity to be creative, even if they don't consider themselves creative. One of the most frustrating things that I was party to experiencing happened to Dan Muchomas in the yellow shirt there. At Ohio Linux Fest a couple years back, we were trying to explain to somebody what Nauticon was about. And the moment he said art, the guy's like, oh, I don't do art. I don't do art. Yeah, turns around and walks away. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a cop-out because... But, I think there's art in everything. I mean, if you look at great code, a lot of that can be artistic. If you look at good hardware design, there's some hardware design out there that I look at it, and even though I'm a failed double E, I get a little twinge in my pants, I have to admit. And that's not just because of Al either. Yes. Okay, so you're talking about destructive versus constructive creativity. You can thank me later. Well, we will discuss that. That's a great idea because most people have no clue. Or even to figure out when the project really needs to kind of, Exactly, yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like the saying for life is, most of it's just showing up. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to at least get things to a point where you have almost everything taken care of. Yes.
The model that we have, and I think it's kind of similar to the model that Tucson has, is that there's a democracy with a despot at the head of it. Where people, as long as they get along, and they're all kind of pushing the ball in the same direction,
Yeah.
and they're not beating each other up in the playground, everything goes okay. But when there's a fast course correction or a critical decision that needs to be made, the despot can come in and go, no, hey, this is what we're going to do, and everyone says, sure, yes, sir, or ma'am, yes, ma'am, kind of situation, and everything moves ahead. And I found that with both organizations, that's been remarkably effective in allowing people creative control in a way that's still productive for the overall goals of the organization.
Exactly.
People have got too far afield, God knows not be like, no, absolutely, we cannot. Oh my God, no, no. And it wouldn't cause
Yeah.
right, but it wouldn't cause price in the front page of the New York Times. It was kind of
Yeah, that's kind of a nice thing to keep on the level. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. And there is a problem that it doesn't necessarily scale once you get really, really large, but that's why my overall argument is, don't become large, and that's easier said than done, right? It's easier said than done, but it's something that kind of needs to happen. To bring things back to local and hyper-local communities, which is another thing I kind of wanted to really hit on. One of the reasons that I originally started Nauticon was because I was at the university I worked at, and I realized I didn't know a single person in the Cleveland area that I really knew that loved technology as much as I did. I had to go all the way to SummerCon in Pittsburgh to meet some guy who lived really close to me to know that he even lived in Cleveland at all. And I'm like, why is it that we have to, had to travel 200 miles just to meet each other when we live like 10 minutes away? This is really stupid. And what I recognized is that there really aren't many good communities of people, especially hackers and creative types, around. People might argue, well, we have 2600, and yes, there's a couple really great 2600 groups. But speaking from experience, there's a lot of really crappy 2600 groups too, right? And the way 2600 is, they try to encourage fewer meetings versus more meetings. Well, don't have a meeting in these two cities because they're really only 30 minutes away. You should have one large meeting. I don't think that's the case, because I think you should have the ability in your own town or your own city or your own local regional area to have a group of people and a community of people that you can bounce ideas off of without having to wait until the first Friday of the month to go to this one coffee shop, an hour and a half away. That could be a lot of fun, but that isn't necessarily the most productive or the best way to do it. So one of the challenges that I'm facing right now is how to build a local community in Cleveland and how to build this group of people from scratch. That's not an easy thing to do. But I think HackerCons like this at least enable us to get people who are really, really into the idea together. Because the kind of people that tend to tend to attend HackerCons tend to be the kind of folks who are ready for action and who are just looking for the right channel or motivation or person or opportunity in order to jump on something new. And once you have that, then you can kind of spread out. A lot of people, for example, as far as Nauticon goes, there's still a lot of people in Cleveland, for example, I meet that they say, well, what is it you do? And I'm like, I run this little thing called Nauticon. And they're like, I've never heard of that. What is it about? I'm like, well, we screw around with technology, art, music. And they're like, holy crap, I've been wanting to do that for 20 years. It's a matter of, where have you guys been? It's a matter of, how to get that word out and how to build that community. Europe has, when Rick was talking about the CCC and C-Base, they've been doing this for a long time. For example, when we get back to the demo scene, we are, Block Party, which is at Nauticon, is one of the largest in North America, and we had maybe about 30 or 40 people specifically for Block Party. However, if you look at Finland, they have this little event called Assembly, which has I don't know how many thousands of people in a stadium. Yeah. And there just aren't events like that here in the United States, except for events like DEF CON and HOPE, big media events where you can bring all these people together. So one of the challenges I think we need to do is to attend events, not only smaller events like these, but when we do go to larger events, try to really find your people, as it were, and try whatever you can do to, start a new user group, start a new meeting, even if it's not, super specific, just, yes, Dan? True. Yeah, yeah. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's tons of opportunities here, and that's what I find so exciting. There's so many opportunities here in the United States, and there's so much cool stuff we can still do that hasn't been made illegal yet. So before it does become illegal, have some fun with it. Okay. Yeah. It is, and that actually brings up something else too. A lot of people that I'll talk to about HackerCons, they're like, well, I really like computers, and I really like doing this, this, and this, but I don't think I'm good enough. So there's all these barriers to entry that people think exist that aren't there. I will be the first to admit, I'm an absolute idiot. All right? I don't know anything about anything. Thank you. Yeah. But what I do know is that a long time ago, I stopped enjoying hacking computers as a technology. I mean, it was fun. I got over it. My big thing is now I like hacking people. I like hacking communities. I like hacking relationships. That's what I get off on and find fun. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And that's still hacking. And people say, well, don't you mean social engineering? No, I don't. Sometimes, maybe it can be classified as such, but I'm more interested in talking to somebody who doesn't like to talk to other people and get them in a conversation. And then I feel kind of cool because I pwned them and got them to talk to me about what it is they enjoy doing. It's easier said than done sometimes. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. That's a great idea. And actually, that reminds me of an idea I had yesterday and completely forgot about. One of the things that I'd like to see start doing at HackerCons is having a map or something where you could put a push pin in, or even if it's like an online, Google Maps kind of thing, where you can not only put in where you're from, but what you're into. Have a list of keywords maybe that you can throw in there. Because I would love to find out, for example, talk to people maybe at this con who are into psychology, who are into sociology. I'm sure there's one or two people there. There's a couple people. Yeah. Those are the kind of people that I want to talk to. Yes. Yeah, and that's actually one of the that is it's a perennial problem. HackerCon has a lot of negative connotation. I don't want to go over the great discussion we already had, and Rick Dakin's talk about it. But what I think one of the things we have to do as a community is to rebrand ourselves in a way. When I talk about Nauticon, for example, I don't refer to it as a HackerCon, except as somebody who I know will get what HackerCon really means. Which is also one of our biggest challenges, because somebody says, well, what is this event about? So instead of having a nice two-word answer, we say, well, we're about this, this, and this. What I've got to boil down to, and what I hope a lot of other events that are in the similar vein as us, can go into, is our mantra. What we finally were able to concisely put down events like these into is three things: technology, creativity, and community. That pretty much covers everything. And it's three words that people understand. And if by putting them all together, not only do they end in E, so it kind of sounds nice, but it gives people a better idea, briefly, of what it is you're about. It doesn't say hacker. It doesn't say computers. It says exactly what it is. And for a lot of us, that's exactly what we're into. You know, we might be into computer security or network security or this or that, but when it really boils down to it, it boils down to technology, creativity, community. Because when at the end of the day, that's the whole reason we're here, right? So keep these 3 words in mind. Use these 3 words as perhaps a way to explain these events instead of HackerCons. I think you'll find you'll get a lot more mileage with them. And more importantly, people will say, well, what is it that you mean by that? And then that gives you the opportunity to start the conversation, which you need to have to explain to them what it is this is all about. Because the best way to bring people into the community and to bring people into the circle is to have one-on-one conversations with them. It only works grassroots. That's what I've learned about Nauticon and all these other events. You can't broadcast out your message of this is what our event is about. You should love it and attend it. That's not how it works. I know, because that's what we tried to do for the first couple Nauticons, and that was a very expensive mistake. But you have to have one-on-one conversations with people, and you have to engage people and try to see what they're into and then relate what they're into back to the event that you're throwing. And in closing, organized page. Okay, yeah. I want you to visualize what it is you're trying to do in your project. Make sure you have a good idea of the goal it is you're trying to accomplish, whatever it is, whether it's a piece of software, a conference, whatever it is you do. Organize yourself. However it is, who cares how, who really cares as, if it's a dictatorship or, if it's whatever it is, just have some structure there and use it. And finally, patronize all these events that are being thrown around here. For me, I find it very difficult sometimes to get off my ass and to go out to these events. But I find that when I do, even if it's not something I'm necessarily interested in, there's still a lot of value there. I come to Phreaknic not because of the presentations, most of which are fantastic, but I come here to meet a whole bunch of people. There's a whole bunch of events going on in your neighborhood, I'm sure, that are really interesting, that might not be exactly what you're into. They might be about art or photography, whatever it is. Take it over. Go in there, make it your own. Do whatever it is you need to do. Get out with people, because believe it or not, that's actually a lot more fun than sitting in your basement and doing nothing. Patronize all these events. And finally, shameless self-promotion. We're having this really kick-ass room party up in 825 at 10 o'clock, sponsored by Nauticon. And if you don't have any adult beverages to get schnookered with, we have you covered. Trust me. So I want y'all to come up there and talk with us. We're going to be up there all evening, having a good time. And, please just do whatever it is you need to do to build community and to build groups in your own small areas. And, yeah, I'm really tired. Thank you, everybody.